when you are the Saviour, a Buddhist lesson on emotional boundaries. You are lying awake right now, carrying the exhausting, heavy ache of trying to save someone else from their own choices, feeling a sharp knot of helplessness in your chest, and wrestling with a quiet guilt for simply being safe in your bed, while a person you love is drowning in their own chaos. Perhaps it is a child, a partner, or a parent whose self-destruction you have been desperately trying to fix, leap after leap, holding your breath every time their life swerves into trouble. Your mind is thrashing like a swimmer caught in a midnight current, convinced that if you stop worrying for even one single moment, if you dare to close your eyes and rest, you are somehow abandoning them to the dark. The air in your room is cool, still, and grounded. The subtle scent of dried cedar or clean cotton lingers near your bedpost, and the broad wooden frame beneath your mattress holds your weight effortlessly, offering your body a motionless quay without asking you to row out into the storm tonight. Dear friend, this overwhelming panic for another soul does not mean your boundaries are cold, nor does it mean you are a selfish person for needing to sleep. It is simply the weariness of a solid dock that has tried to leap off its river pilings to chase adrift timber down the rapids, believing that a mooring post must drown alongside the vessel to prove its devotion. You do not have to fix their life before dawn, nor do you need to steer their boat to safety from the dark of this bedroom. Your capacity to offer a steady, loving presence was never built on throwing yourself into their flood, and your own life requires no sacrifice of rest to remain a true sanctuary. Tonight, you are invited to let your heavy rescue hooks drop into the quiet water, allowing your chest to sit firmly anchored to the solid granite of your own peaceful room. A surprising, profound paradox sits at the very core of Buddhist reflection when we look at love, responsibility, and the suffering of those we cherish. We often believe that deep love demands that we suffer whenever our loved ones suffer, matching their storm with our own internal turmoil. Yet ancient wisdom reminds us that jumping into a raging gorge alongside a drowning traveler does not give them a foothold. It merely creates two drowning souls where there was once a chance for a solid shore. True compassion is not an act of shared destruction. Real love is becoming a granite post so deeply anchored into the bedrock that no matter how wild the river becomes, there remains a motionless landing, waiting on the bank whenever they choose to turn toward calm water. The mind mistakenly insists that if you lay down your panic at 2 in the morning, you are turning your back on their pain. It treats your personal peace as an act of cold betrayal, convincing you that your anxiety is a magical shield that keeps them safe from afar. But a heavy stone river dock resting against the riverbank does not betray the floating logs sweeping past its sides. The dock does not weep over the current that pulls the timber downstream, nor does it tear its granite blocks apart to chase the driftwood into the sea. It simply holds its deep, silent anchorage in the earth, knowing that the river must flow where the river flows, and that a dock must remain solid if it is ever to offer a true landing. Think of how much vital life force you have burned by trying to control a current that belongs to another person's journey. You have felt your heart leap at every sudden noise or screen notification. You have clenched your jaw in the dark, mentally drafting advice they will not take, carrying their burdens until your own shoulders are raw and bruised. Fighting this savior panic by judging yourself for being exhausted only deepens the ache in your ribs. What if, for these quiet hours, we stop leaping into the river? What if we allow your spine to become like that deeply anchored granite post, rooted firmly into the quiet floorboards, completely unbothered by the wild waters rushing past? Let the tight muscles across your upper back unclamp completely, releasing the grip in your collarbones and throat. Feel the firm, broad mattress beneath your hips and lower back, taking the full, unburdened weight of your skeleton, without demanding any effort in return. Listen to the long, effortless rhythm of your breath, moving through your chest, slow and steady in the dark. There is no need to direct your breathing or force it into a deeper pattern. Let the air flow gently through your nose like a cool river mist, drifting across a silent quay, soft, unhurried, and entirely free. Perhaps you have carried this burden of fixing others for many years, living in a constant state of hyper-vigilant responsibility, where every crisis around you felt like your personal duty to solve. In the tradition of Zen practice, we do not view your protective panic as a defect in your heart. It is seen as the natural strain of a mooring line that has been wrapped around a person's waist instead of a solid piling. You do not need to solve their life to deserve a peaceful night. You need only to allow your weight to settle deep into the stone foundation of your own bed, so that whatever current sweeps through their life tomorrow, you remain grounded enough to offer a real landing. In a short while, we will travel up a cool mountain gorge, where an elder river pilot watches the autumn floodwaters from a granite quay. But right now, let your physical body sink into the quiet, unconditional safety of this bedroom. The walls around you are thick and still, keeping out the storms of the world, and the darkness here is not a void of neglect, but a quiet, neutral sanctuary that permits your exhausted mind to drop its rescue lines. You do not have to steer their life, repair their mistakes, or protect them from their own consequences before the morning arrives. Your true value as a loving human being was never measured by how much of your own peace you sacrifice to match another person's pain. The human heart can hold boundless love for someone without leaping into their fire, remaining a calm, steady beacon that shines brightly through the dark. Let the tight band of tension around your temples melt away completely. Let your hands rest open and still upon the sheets, your palms loose and soft like empty mooring rings resting on cool stone. There is no river you must swim through in this dark room tonight, no floating timber you need to catch, and no guilt strong enough to strip your body of its right to rest right now. You have reached the end of the day's vigil, and your granite foundation is completely safe enough to hold your weight. As we drift deeper into the quiet night ahead, remember that your true nature is like a solid river dock anchored in the earth. It does not lose its love for the water, simply because it remains firmly attached to the shore. The turbulent floods of another's choices can roar past your sides, splash cold spray against your granite, and sweep away into the dark, leaving your deep foundation cool, stable, and completely undisturbed in the quiet room. Let the small, tired muscles around your eyes relax into the dark. Let your legs grow heavy and motionless upon the bed, your ankles and knees completely floppy against the fabric. There is no crisis you must resolve in this room tonight, no life you need to save before dawn, and no storm powerful enough to pull your solid dock out into the flood. You are resting on the immovable earth, and your true foundation is completely broad enough for you to lay down your oars. Up in the narrow granite cut of the upper mountain gorge, where the river churned into cold white spray, lived a young river steward named Haru. The air at the water's edge smelled of wet river silt, pine pitch, crushed water mint, and damp slate. For 2 long autumns, Haru had been living in a state of constant, desperate exhaustion. Upstream from the gorge lay several unruly logging camps, where reckless woodsmen frequently bound their timber poorly, allowing heavy logs to break free into the swift current. Haru loved the river communities downstream, and he lived in absolute terror that these rogue logs would smash into the village fishing boats or shatter the footbridges below. Night after night, whenever the autumn rains swelled the gorge, Haru stood on the slippery rocks with a heavy iron grappling hook attached to a long rope. Whenever he saw a loose, dark log sweeping down the rapids, he would leap directly into the icy torrent, thrashing against the rocks, trying to catch the timber with his own arms. He threw his body into the freezing foam again and again, dragging heavy trunks toward the bank until his hands were torn, his ribs were bruised, and his lungs burned with fever. Yet for every log he managed to haul ashore, 10 more swept past him into the dark. He wept on the riverbank, exhausted, bleeding, and convinced that if he stopped diving for even an hour, the downstream valley would be completely destroyed by his failure. Sitting quietly on a high granite quay above the churning foam was Master Jaku. The old river pilot was an elder mason who had spent 40 years carving deep mooring posts into the gorge walls. Master Jaku wore a simple tunic of oiled hemp, stained with gray stone dust and river mud, his broad shoulders calm and steady. He walked along the quay with slow, grounded steps, holding a heavy iron hammer and an iron chisel, completely unhurried by the roaring water below. One freezing evening, as the swollen river roared through the narrow rocks, Haru crawled up the stone steps of the quay. His clothes were soaked through, His skin blue with cold, his knuckles raw and dripping blood onto the stone, he collapsed at Master Jaku's feet, pointing frantically down at the white rapids where 3 massive spruce trunks were spinning out of control. He begged the old pilot to help him leap back into the flood, weeping that he was not strong enough, and crying that if they did not catch those logs immediately, the village harbor below would be ruined before midnight. Master Jaku set down his heavy stone hammer, wiping his wet, calloused hands on his apron. He did not grab a rope, nor did he look down at the rushing logs in panic. Instead, he led the exhausted young man over to a massive hand-carved granite river post, set deep into the stone quay. Set into the center of the heavy granite post was a thick, smooth iron mooring ring. The iron ring was cold, black, and thick as a man's wrist, forged to hold the heaviest barges against the strongest spring floods. Master Jaku reached into his leather pouch, pulled out a short piece of thick hemp rope, and handed it to Haru. Master Jaku asked the young steward to take the rope, leap into the churning water near the edge of the quay, and try to pull the iron mooring ring down into the river with him. He asked Haru to use all his strength to drag the stone post into the rapids, so that the post could swim downstream alongside the drifting timber. Haru stared at the old pilot in utter confusion, his teeth chattering uncontrollably from the cold. He told Master Jaku that such a request was impossible. He pointed out that the granite post was anchored 10 feet deep into the bedrock of the mountain. A man could pull on the iron ring until his arms tore open, but the post would never move an inch into the current. Master Jaku stepped close to the heavy granite post, laying his broad, dry hand flat against its cool surface. He looked down at Haru's shivering, bloodied body. He asked the young steward why he spent every night trying to become a floating piece of driftwood himself, rather than remaining the solid granite post. The old mason pointed down at the dark, roaring river. He explained that the logging camps upstream would always cut timber, and the wild river would always carry wood downstream. That was the nature of the river and the wood. But by throwing his own flesh and bone into the rapids to fight every log, Haru was not stopping the flood. He was merely drowning the only savior the village possessed. Master Jaku reached out and tapped the thick iron mooring ring. A clear, deep tone echoed through the cold air, vibrating softly against the granite. He told Haru that a true mooring post does not chase the boat out into the storm. Its sacred duty is to remain completely immovable on the dry bank, holding its anchor deep in the earth, so that whenever a battered boat chooses to turn toward the shore, a calm, solid landing is waiting to receive its line. Haru stood frozen on the quay, the cold spray touching his wet face. He looked down at his raw, torn palms, and then at the black iron ring resting motionless in the granite block. The deep, steady hum of the struck iron vibrated in his chest, touching the sharp, desperate knot in his heart. For the very first time, Haru saw the tragic illusion that had driven him to the edge of death. He had believed that his pain was a proof of his love, mistaking his frantic jumping into the flood for genuine protection. He saw how he had turned his own life into a battered log, drowning in a river that was never his to control. Yet as the cold night settled heavily over the gorge, and the roaring water continued to thunder through the rocks below, Haru's fingers still twitched toward his wet rope. He understood the stillness of the granite post, but he did not yet know how to let a log float past in the dark without feeling that his own heart was breaking. This quiet scene on the high stone quay does not ask you to harden your heart, nor does it ask you to turn away from the people you love with cold indifference. Buddhist reflection has never been about closing your eyes to another person's pain, or pretending that you do not care when someone you cherish is swept into dangerous waters. It does not expect you to watch a family member, a partner, or a child struggle without feeling a natural, tender ache inside your chest, wanting to protect those you love, wishing to shield them from harm, and aching to give them a safe harbor, are pure, compassionate impulses that come from the deepest part of your humanity. When someone close to you enters a storm of their own making, a sudden wave of grief and fear naturally travels through your entire nervous system. That initial jolt of sorrow is completely real, honest, and human. It carries its own sharp, immediate sting, much like the bitter splash of cold river spray hitting your face on a winter evening. Living alongside people who are free to make their own choices means that you will inevitably witness them make decisions that hurt them. Feeling that sudden contraction of concern when someone you love stumbles is simply evidence that your heart is open and alive. Yet look closely at what happens in your mind during the late, dark hours after that initial concern strikes your chest. This is where the heavy, suffocating misery of our Saviour complex takes root and multiplies. Driven by a desperate need to guarantee their safety, our mind grabs hold of their chaos and attempts to carry it inside our own body. We lie awake in the dark, endlessly rehearsing interventions, inventing imaginary rescue plans, and convincing ourselves that if we suffer enough on their behalf, we can somehow alter their path. We take a river that belongs entirely to their journey and attempt to drink the entire flood ourselves, destroying our own peace without changing the current flowing through their life. This relentless compulsion to control another person's trajectory is what ancient wisdom describes as emotional entanglement, a deep instinctual habit of confusing your own internal stability with the choices of another independent soul. In our everyday lives, this craving for control is not an abstract idea. It is that tight, burning knot in your chest that insists you have no right to rest while someone else is in distress. It is the exhausting demand that every drifting log in the river must be safely docked before you give your own body permission to lie down upon the earth. Consider what actually takes place when you spend your nights diving mentally into another person's storm. The actual event may have been a single difficult conversation earlier today. The struggle they face may be a long, complex process that only they can navigate. But by continuously leaping into their wild current in your thoughts, you force your own spirit to live through 1,000 imaginary drownings every single night. Their choices belong to their own life. Your exhausted muscles, your racing heart, and your bruised spirit are the secondary injuries created entirely by your own refusal to remain anchored on the dry bank. Quiet reflection reveals that most of the crushing weight sitting on your ribs tonight does not belong to your immediate life. It belongs to the impossible burden of trying to live 2 lives at once. It belongs to the draining, unnatural effort of trying to pull a heavy, drifting boat up the river using your own bare arms. The choices of another person are simply the natural, unpredictable currents of their own individual path. Those choices hold no intrinsic power to pull your granite post out of the bedrock, and demanding that their river become smooth before you allow yourself to breathe only leaves you bleeding on the cold rocks. When we practice soft, spacious equanimity, we are not abandoning those we love, nor are we attempting to erase our natural affection. Real equanimity is simply the quiet, courageous choice to step back onto the stone quay. It is the willingness to let an iron ring sit firm in its granite block without ripping it out of the ground to chase the current. It is the capacity to notice the familiar wave of Saviour panic rising in your chest, and to say to yourself, I love this person deeply, but I do not need to drown in their river to prove my devotion tonight. When you allow your hands to drop away from the heavy grappling hooks, an immense cool relief begins to flow through your nervous system. This is the profound, comforting reality of human freedom made visible in your relationships. Freedom means acknowledging that every individual soul carries their own life, their own learning, and their own consequences. When you stop trying to manage another person's fate, those terrifying projections naturally lose their grip, dissolving into the wide, quiet space of your present awareness. The massive granite post stands firm on the riverbank, not because it is callous, but because its rock is grounded, deep, and immovable. The wild floods do not shatter the stone. They merely flow around its sides, leaving its deep foundation completely undisturbed. In the exact same way, when you stop frantically trying to control another person's journey, your inner spirit recovers an innate, quiet resilience that remains unbothered by external storms. The urge to constantly dive into the rapids falls away, leaving a clear, steady presence that knows how to offer a true landing without losing its own footing. This grounded presence is your true, unshakable sanctuary. It was never created by another person's good behavior, nor was it diminished by the chaotic choices of those around you. The quiet awareness inside you that witnesses your protective fear is completely untouched by the river. It remains broad, calm, and solid like the ancient stone quay holding the heavy iron rings against the winter flood. Offering genuine love to another person does not mean that you become their shield against life. Real love is simply the willingness to remain a solid, unshakable landing where they can find safety whenever they are ready to turn toward the shore. It is the quiet courage to say, "I cannot walk your path for you, and I cannot carry your consequences, but my foundation is firm, my heart is open, and my landing remains clear whenever you choose to rest." Slowly, a deep, cool understanding begins to settle into your bones. You begin to see that dropping your late-night rescue missions is not an act of selfish abandonment. It is the only way to preserve the vital strength and clarity you will actually need if they ever turn to you for true refuge. Surrendering the impossible job of saving another person from themselves is not a failure. It is the sacred doorway to discovering the immovable peace that was always waiting within your own quiet granite. As you lie here in the quiet sanctuary of your room, feeling the firm support beneath your spine, you can begin to feel how close this grounded foundation really is. It does not require your loved one to change overnight, nor does it demand that their storm vanish before dawn. It requires only a single moment of gentle release, a soft loosening of the tight grip in your chest, allowing your weight to rest upon the solid stone of the present moment without asking you to row out into the dark. In a short while, we will practice a very simple way of sensing this immovable granite foundation within your own physical body. But even right now, as you listen to these soft words, notice how your lungs expand and empty without demanding anything from the river. Your breath moves quietly through the dark, steady, deep, and completely whole, exactly as it is. Now, if it feels comfortable for your frame right now, allow your posture to settle into a state of quiet stillness against your bed. There is no specific alignment you must achieve, and no special position you need to force upon your limbs. You might let your arms lie softly beside your sides, or allow your palms to rest gently against your lower ribs, wherever your shoulders feel most unburdened. If your eyes are still half open, perhaps you can let your eyelids drift shut, inviting the quiet dark of the room to blanket your vision. Nothing in this space is asking you to leap into a current, and no rescue mission requires your effort tonight. Take a slow, quiet breath in through your nose, letting the cool air expand your chest, and then let it slip out softly through your lips, allowing your physical weight to sink into the mattress like a heavy granite block, settling into deep river soil. You do not need to count your breaths or regulate their movement. Simply allow your lungs to draw air the way an ancient stone quay breathes under a night sky, steady, natural, and completely unhurried. With every quiet exhale, perhaps you can feel a subtle loosening in the tight muscles around your collarbones, your neck, and the delicate center of your chest. If a sharp ache of Saviour panic remains in your heart, that is entirely fine as well. You do not need to fight that tightness or push it away. Even noticing that old urge to dive into the flood without judging yourself for holding it is a moment of deep, gentle restoration. As you lie here in the dark, allow your attention to turn softly toward one specific person or situation that made you feel helpless, terrified, or guilty today. It might be a loved one whose self-destructive path makes you ache, a child whose choices keep you awake, or a partner whose heavy storm you have been desperately trying to calm. Do not try to solve their life right now, and do not attempt to draft another rescue plan. Simply let that familiar, tense memory sit quietly in the warm light of your awareness, like a heavy iron hook resting on a cold stone floor. Perhaps you can give a very soft, silent name to what your mind is doing. You might whisper to yourself, "This is the feeling of trying to jump into the rapids to catch drifting timber." Or perhaps, "This is my spirit trying to drag a heavy boat upstream with my bare hands." By naming this internal pattern with a gentle, non-judgmental voice, you step back from the edge of the roaring water. You begin to observe the urge to save another soul without letting it pull your feet off the solid bank. Now, if it feels right, bring to your mind's eye the image of that thick, black iron mooring ring set deep into Master Jacques' granite post. See its heavy forged metal, smooth and cold, anchored 10 feet deep into the mountain bedrock. Picture your own spine as that immovable stone post, rooted deep into the quiet earth, completely unbothered by the water swirling around its base. Feel how broad and solid your foundation is, holding your entire weight with absolute unyielding ease. Imagine taking that heavy rescue hook, that exhausting obligation to fix your loved one's life, and gently looping its iron eye onto that solid mooring ring set in the stone. You do not need to throw the hook into the current, nor do you need to pull on the line. You simply allow that heavy iron piece to hang quietly on the ring, trusting the deep stone post to hold the entire weight while you rest. Watch what happens in your imagination when you let the hook hang quietly on the ring. Picture a cool mountain spray rising from the dark river below. The fine mist sweeps over the granite quay, swirling gently around the black iron ring, washing away the blood, the silt, and the heat of the struggle from its smooth metal surface. Notice how the solid stone post beneath the quay remains completely unmoved. The rushing river water roars past its sides, splashing cold foam against the granite, and sweeps away into the dark gorge below. The stone post does not reach out to grab the passing current. It does not argue with the wild river, nor does it leap into the foam to chase the drifting logs. It simply remains broad, anchored, and deep, completely untouched by the flood moving through the rocks. If your mind strays back into its old habit of worrying about your loved one, or feeling guilty for resting, there is no need to feel frustrated with yourself. Your mind has been trying to protect the people you love through hypervigilant panic for a very long time, and old rescue habits do not vanish in a single night. Whenever you catch yourself reaching for the grappling hook again, simply notice that movement with a soft, forgiving heart. You can quietly say to yourself, "My mind is trying to jump into the rapids again," and then imagine stepping back onto the dry stone quay. You can return to this solid granite post whenever you are ready, as many times as you need tonight. There is no life you must repair before you are permitted to fall asleep. You do not need to guarantee your loved one's safety, nor do you need to prove that your devotion is strong enough by sacrificing your sleep before dawn arrives. Healing your relationship with love is not a sudden, dramatic event where the river stops flowing. It is a series of quiet, hidden moments where you choose to stay on the stone quay and let your foundation hold you. Even a single breath spent trusting your own anchor allows your nervous system to taste the quiet safety that lives beyond panic. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your lungs, lifting your ribs slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. The solid weight of your hips, your spine, and your legs is completely held by the bed beneath you. You do not need to swim through a storm tonight. You do not need to prove to anyone that your love is real by suffering in the dark. The mattress is holding you, the room is enclosing you, and the vast earth beneath your house is wide enough to support your entire life without asking you to leap into the flood. In a short while, we will travel further down the mountain gorge toward a river bend shelter, where an old fairy woman weaves heavy ropes, where a sister must learn what happens when she ties her brother's storm directly around her own waist. But for now, allow yourself to remain right here in your bed. Let the iron mooring ring sit quietly in the granite block. Let your hands remain soft and open upon the sheets, knowing that nothing needs to be saved, nothing needs to be forced, and that your broad inner stone is completely safe enough to rest. Farther down the mountain, where the river broadened into a wide, dark eddy near a stand of weeping autumn willows, sat a low timber shelter. The air beneath the roof smelled of dried river reeds, wood smoke, wet hemp, and damp pine tar. In this quiet shelter worked a young village herbalist named Nami, whose brother had been consumed by a dark, destructive restlessness for many months. Her brother frequently wandered too close to the crumbling mud cliffs above the river, drinking bitter, wild grain spirits, ignoring every warning, and stumbling along the slippery rocks in the dark. Nami lived in a state of constant, exhausting panic for his survival. To keep him from falling into the churning current, she had plaited a long, heavy tow rope from rough hemp fiber, coating the rope in thick pine pitch to keep the water from rotting its strands. Nami had bound one end of this thick, pitch-coated rope tightly around her own waist, holding the remaining coils in her bruised, raw hands, while her brother held the far end as he paced along the edge of the precipice. Every time her brother stumbled on a loose stone, the heavy rope snapped tight against Nami's ribs, jerking her off her feet, dragging her through the mud, and leaving her torso covered in painful purple bruises. She believed that by physically tethering her own body to his recklessness, she was keeping him alive, convinced that if she untied the rope from her waist for even a single night, he would plunge into the abyss and perish. Living inside the riverbend shelter was Sister Eshin, an aged ferrywoman and netweaver who spent her days repairing thick river nets. Sister Eshin wore a faded indigo tunic, her silver hair coiled neatly at her neck, her face weathered like ancient driftwood. She worked with quiet, steady discipline, using a wooden shuttle to knot heavy hemp cords into strong, square meshes that could withstand the pull of the deepest river currents. She had been watching Nami for weeks, seeing the young woman gasp in pain every time the taut rope jerked against her waist, listening to her weeping in the dark as her brother thrashing about near the slippery bank. One rainy evening, as a sudden gale blew down the valley and turned the river into a wall of brown, frothing water, Nami's brother stumbled badly on a patch of wet shale near the edge of the cliff. The heavy pitch-coated rope snapped taut with a violent crack. Nami was slammed hard against the wooden corner post of the shelter, the thick rope digging so deeply into her ribs that her breath was instantly cut off. She gasped for air, her fingers bleeding as she gripped the pitch-stained fiber, her feet sliding through the mud toward the edge of the drop. Her brother was screaming in the dark, thrashing in the mud, refusing to climb back onto the flat path, yet refusing to let go of his end of the line. Nami sat trapped in absolute agony, her lungs burning, her chest crushed by the weight of his struggle. She looked at Sister Eshin with wild, terrified eyes, begging the old ferrywoman to help her hold the rope. She cried out that if she let go of the tension for even a second, her brother would slide off the wet shale into the river below, insisting that her own ribs must bear the crush to keep him from dying. Sister Eshin did not rush forward to grab the rope, nor did she panic at the screaming in the dark. Instead, the old ferrywoman picked up a heavy, iron-bound wooden mallet from her workbench and walked slowly over to a massive timber piling set 6 feet deep into the clay floor of the shelter. Sister Eshin reached down, grabbed the thick section of pitch-coated rope running between Nami's waist and her brother's hands, and looped the heavy cord twice around the solid timber piling. She then drove a thick oak peg into the piling with her wooden mallet, pinning the rope securely against the immovable post. The very instant the rope was secured to the timber piling, the crushing tension on Nami's waist vanished. The heavy cord hummed tightly against the oak post, holding the brother's full weight against the cliff, but the bone-crushing pull no longer touched Nami's body. Sister Eshin pulled out a small horn knife, cut the loop of rope that was wrapped around Nami's waist, and let the severed tail drop harmlessly into the mud. She looked down at the young woman, who was lying on the floorboards, gasping for air, clutching her bruised purple ribs in disbelief. The old ferrywoman pointed to the massive timber piling holding the taut line in the dark. She asked Nami why she had spent months using her own soft flesh and bone as a mooring post, when the solid timber of the shelter had been standing right beside her all along. Sister Eshin explained that tethering another person stormed directly to your own body does not make the other person stand upright. It merely guarantees that when they stumble, 2 people are dragged into the mud instead of 1. By binding his chaos to her waist, Nami had not taught her brother how to find his own footing on the path. She had merely turned her own life into a violent anchor that was tearing her apart from the inside out. Sister Eshin gently laid her hand on Nami's trembling shoulder. She told the young woman that anchor ropes belong around solid pilings, not around human hearts. She pointed out that the timber post would hold her brother's line with absolute firmness, giving him a stable rope to pull himself up whenever he chose to stand on his own feet. But Nami's duty was to step back, heal her bruised ribs, and keep the hearth fire burning inside the shelter so there would be warmth waiting when he finally decided to walk through the door. Nami lay on the wooden floorboards, listening to the rain dripping from the willow branches outside. She looked at the severed rope tail resting in the mud, and then at the taut cord anchored firmly to the oak piling. A deep, piercing realization dropped into her chest, breaking through her protective panic like a beam of sunlight through dark river fog. She saw clearly for the first time that her constant pain had not been saving her brother. Her bruised ribs had not made him sober, nor had her tears made the slippery mud any safer under his feet. She had been treating her own suffering as a magical payment, believing that as long as she was bleeding, he was protected from his own choices. Nami took a slow, deep breath, feeling the cool air fill her sore lungs without the crushing weight of the pitch-coated rope around her waist. She did not instantly lose all her fear for her brother, nor did she turn her back on him in cold anger. Instead, she chose one small, quiet act of discipline. She stood up slowly, walked over to the stone hearth and added 3 dry birch logs to the dying embers. She set a kettle of river water on the trivet, sat down on a low wooden stool near the fire, and placed her hands softly in her lap. She allowed the rope to remain anchored to the solid post, allowing her brother to hold his own line in the dark, while she kept her own heart anchored in the quiet warmth of the shelter. The image of Nami sitting near the hearth while the rope remains anchored to the timber piling uncovers a profound truth about how our nervous systems manufacture our internal exhaustion. So much of our Latin night emotional torment stems from a subtle, deeply ingrained belief that our love for another human being is measured by how tightly we bind their chaos around our own waist. We take on an impossible responsibility for another person's choices, and we convince ourselves that if we suffer enough on their behalf, we can magically alter the river flowing through their life. This compulsion to play the savior is often driven by an underlying panic toward uncertainty and powerlessness. When someone we love enters a destructive storm, our mind feels utterly terrified of having no control over the outcome. To soothe that terrifying sense of helplessness, our internal surveillance jumps into high gear. We construct elaborate mental scenarios, replay past conversations, and draft future interventions, attempting to build a protective wall around them. We convince ourselves that if we just worry enough, if we stay hypervigilant through the dark, we can hold their life together through sheer force of will. Yet this habit of binding another's storm to our own body is a form of resistance that turns original care into chronic suffering. When you refuse to let a loved one carry their own consequences, you are secretly operating under the illusion that you are the sole guardian of their destiny. You begin to define your own worth through your ability to keep them afloat, turning your protective panic into a permanent identity. You stop viewing yourself as a grounded sanctuary capable of offering real warmth, and begin seeing yourself as an exhausted martyr whose only function is to absorb the impacts of someone else's fall. Buddhist wisdom offers a gentle, illuminating lantern that exposes this exact trap without asking you to become cold or distant. It asks us to look closely at the vital difference between the natural sorrow life brings and the heavy, secondary misery our own minds create through control and resistance. Moving through an interconnected world means that you will naturally feel a pang of sadness when someone you care about stumbles. That initial ache of empathy is an unavoidable condition of having an open, loving heart. However, the agonizing, sleepless exhaustion that keeps your throat tight at midnight is not the other person's struggle. It is the extra weight generated by your own decision to knot their rough, pitch-coated rope around your ribs and pull against the river. It is like a fisherman who stands on a quiet stone pier, and upon seeing a heavy river barge drifting in the current, decides to wrap a coarse steel cable around his own chest and drop to his knees on the wet granite, straining his muscles until his bones crack, trying to hold back 20 tons of moving iron with his bare torso, creating an unbearable, crushing agony entirely through his refusal to attach the cable to the pier's iron cleat. The drifting barge in the river is the primary reality of the water. The shattered ribs and torn skin are the secondary suffering created entirely by his insistence on being the cleat himself. Peace does not arrive when you somehow force the river barge to stop moving downstream. True liberation begins the very second you unhook the cable from your own ribs, loop its eye securely around the iron cleat anchored in the stone, and take a step back onto the pier. The river current will continue to flow as it must. You can offer a sturdy line and keep a bright lantern burning on the dock, but using your own flesh as a mooring post does not make the water any shallower. Consider how much of your daily depletion comes from attempting to bear burdens that belong entirely to another soul's journey. We freeze in late-night vigilance because we falsely believe that resting our own body is an act of selfish abandonment. But your true nature is not a fragile piece of rope that must snap under the weight of someone else's choices. Your awareness is like the deep granite quay itself, broad, immovable, and solid, holding space for the river without being swept away by the flood. When you surrender the impossible demand to fix another person's life, a massive weight lifts from your collarbones. The tight, defensive muscles around your chest and jaw, which have been locked for months to brace against their next crisis, can finally begin to soften. Your lungs find room to draw a complete, unburdened breath of cool night air. You begin to realize that remaining grounded on the shore, even while watching a loved one navigate rough waters, is not a failure of love. It is the highest form of respect you can offer to their independent journey. You are fully permitted to be a steady refuge rather than a thrashing swimmer in their flood. Your capacity to offer true compassion was never dependent on sacrificing your own sanity. You do not need to prove the depth of your care by drowning alongside them in the dark. You were created with a resilient, stable core, designed to stand firm upon the earth, capable of keeping a warm hearth burning while leaving the heavy ropes securely attached to the post. As you lie here in the dark, watching your breath move quietly through your ribs, notice when your mind attempts to pull you back into its old savior calculations. It might whisper that you are being cold, or that you must step in and fix their life before morning comes. Observe that thought with soft, unhurried presence. You do not need to fight the thought, nor do you need to obey its frantic demands. You can simply view it as a piece of loose river foam floating past on the dark current, carrying no power to disturb the massive granite foundation resting beneath your bed. This wisdom of anchoring the heavy rope to a solid timber piling, rather than binding it around your own waist, belongs directly inside the noisy, anxious crossroad moments of your modern routine. It finds its truest value during those dark, quiet hours, when the mind starts leaping out into another person's chaotic stream to pull them towards safety. Consider how easily this old rescue pattern unfolds on a completely ordinary evening. You lie in the dark, watching the pale glow of a small screen on your nightstand, waiting for a reply from a family member, a partner, or a friend who is going through a crisis. Every time the glass brightens, a sharp jolt of adrenaline hits your ribs. You grab the device, searching their brief words for signs of trouble, mentally drafting 3 different responses to keep them from spiraling. You feel an overwhelming urge to fix their mood, to offer instant advice, or to stay awake all night monitoring their emotional weather, believing that if you drop your vigilance for even an hour, their world will collapse. In that exact moment when your thumbs tremble over the screen, you are binding their pitch-coated rope directly around your waist. The frantic voice in your head insists that taking on their strain is the only way to prove you love them. But wisdom invites you to create one small, spacious pause before taking action. You can feel the broad, motionless mattress beneath your back. You can acknowledge the uncomfortable surge of fear in your chest without obeying its command to dive into the rapids. Setting the glass face down on the nightstand, letting the rope rest firmly looped around the iron cleat of your own boundaries, is how you stay on the dry stone quay. It is a quiet, radical choice to trust that your presence remains a true refuge only when your own foundation stays firmly rooted in the earth. Or think about those exhausting moments during the day when you feel a heavy guilt for simply wanting a quiet hour to yourself. You watch a loved one struggle with their own bad habits, their own low mood, or their own chaotic decisions, and a cold voice of shame whispers that you have no right to feel peace, to enjoy a meal, or to rest while they are hurting. You put on a cheerful mask to manage their reactions, smiling outwardly while carrying a crushing weight beneath your ribs, terrified that being happy without them makes you a heartless person. When those waves of savior guilt threaten to pull you off your feet, you can choose to stop treating your personal peace as a betrayal of their journey. You do not need to plunge into the mud to demonstrate genuine care. You can keep a warm hearth fire burning in your own shelter, offering a calm, steady space without allowing their storm to dictate your breath. Allowing yourself to feel grounded, safe, and unburdened, even while someone you cherish navigates rough waters, is not an act of cold neglect. It is the unshakable sanity of a harbor that stays still so returning boats can find their way home. Notice too how often you punish yourself for needing rest without having saved everyone around you first. You finish a long, emotionally draining day of holding other people together, yet the second your head touches the pillow, an inner taskmaster begins its harsh interrogation. It asks why you did not say more, why you could not fix their pain, or how you can justify sleeping when their life remains unresolved. It treats your physical exhaustion as a failure of character, demanding that you earn your sleep by solving their destiny in the dark. Yet the massive granite river post resting on the quay does not ask permission from the floodwaters to hold its place on the dry bank. It stands flat, solid, and immovable, holding its deep anchorage in the bedrock, unbothered by how fast the mountain river sweeps past its stone sides. Rest is not a luxury reserved only for those who have rescued every soul in the valley. Rest is the fundamental quiet ground from which all real strength, clarity, and enduring compassion bloom. Giving yourself complete permission to lie flat in this dark room tonight, without holding anyone's rope or steering anyone's boat, is how you honor the sacred timber of your own life. Living this path in modern life does not require you to turn cold or abandon the people who need your support. It shows up in the quietest, simplest boundaries of your day. It is taking one long, steady breath before jumping into someone else's argument. It is choosing not to replay a loved one's mistakes 500 times in your mind before dawn. It is the brave, quiet realization that their internal storm is an independent river, carrying no intrinsic power to rip your granite foundation out of the mountain. You do not need to become a perfect, unfeeling post by tomorrow morning. The Zen path is not about building a heart made of ice that never feels the sting of empathy. It is simply about unhooking that rough, heavy tow rope that you have wrapped around your ribs out of habit for far too long. It is learning to catch the moment your chest tightens with Saviour panic, and gently reminding yourself that you can loop the cord around a stationary piling instead of your own flesh. When you practice offering love from a grounded shore rather than from the middle of the torrent, your life recovers a quiet, unhurried stability. You can offer clear help when it is truly invited, stepping forward with practical care during the day, and then return to your own quiet landing when night arrives. You step out of the exhausting role of the frantic rescuer, entering the room as a solid, calm sanctuary that holds space for others without drowning alongside them. As these late hours settle softly around your home right now, allow these simple truths to cool the remaining heat in your heart. You have thrown yourself into enough freezing rapids. You have carried enough pitch-coated ropes around your ribs. The working day, with its endless crises, its emotional demands, and its heavy rescue missions, has fully retreated into the dark. The night has opened a vast peaceful shelter around your bed, offering a quiet sanctuary where no river needs to be conquered, no boat needs to be caught, and no guilt needs to be carried. Feel the easy, natural movement of your chest continuing its silent work in the dark. Cool air fills your ribs, lifting your chest slightly, and flows out with a long, soft fall. You are completely allowed to lay down your grappling hooks for the night. You are permitted to let every savior fear, every codependent ache, and every sharp worry dissolve into the wide, dark silence beyond your window. The solid granite quay beneath your house is resting, cool and vast, ready to support your entire weight without asking you to leap into the flood. Now let every heavy grappling hook, iron mooring ring, and pitch-coated rope dissolve into the quiet, dark soil of the river shelter. The stories of Haru standing on the high stone, Quay and Nami sitting near the hearth fire have completed their quiet, steady work inside your chest. They are no longer words spoken into the dark, but are sinking down like cool, fresh river mist percolating through layers of damp silt, reaching the immovable granite bedrock deep within your soul. The heavy iron hammers have been set down upon the timber bench. The wooden shuttles rest still in the net basket. The pitch-stained cords remain tied to the oak piling, leaving your hands empty, soft and unburdened in the quiet darkness. Your physical frame is becoming deeply, comfortably heavy against the steady mattress beneath you. Feel the back of your shoulders and your shoulder blades letting go of their last subtle grip, sinking an inch deeper into the soft sheets. Your eyelids feel weighted, smooth and completely relaxed, as if a gentle spray of river water had washed away every trace of protective panic from behind your brow. The delicate muscles around your jaw unclamp, letting your throat open into a spacious, cool passage where the night air flows easily, without any need to steer another soul's boat or defend your right to rest. Every breath you draw now is becoming slower, lighter, and almost silent. A quiet intake of air arrives, lifting your chest like a faint breeze touching weeping willow branches, and then glides out like river mist floating softly over a calm eddy. Inhale, slow and spacious. Exhale, long, quiet, and uncalculated. You are not measuring the air moving through your ribs. You are simply allowing the natural wisdom of your body to breathe itself, steady, unforced, and completely whole as it is. Imagine a solid granite river dock resting motionless under a quiet, starry night in the mountain gorge. The cool water laps softly against its base, washing over the black iron mooring ring with a long, peaceful cadence. Deep within the dark riverbed, the ancient rock sits in perfect, unbroken stillness, holding the heavy quay without asking which way the floating logs travel in the dark. There are no stewards diving into the freezing rapids, no ropes bound around bruised ribs, and no chaotic floods capable of pulling the stone out into the deep. The granite landing stretches broad, stable, and grounded in the dark, holding its anchor in the bedrock while the dark water flows gently past its sides. Inside your own body, that exact same immovable foundation is quietly opening up. The sharp, tight dread of needing to save someone else has slipped out of your ribs long ago. It has drifted away through the river shelter, carried off into the night air where no one can ever demand that you drown alongside them again. You do not need to pull anyone out of the current to feel safe tonight. You do not need to prove your devotion by sacrificing your sleep. The vast night is wide enough to hold their independent journey, and quiet enough to let you rest without throwing yourself into the flood. Feel the deep heaviness in your thighs and calves, melting into the supportive bed. Feel your ankles and toes resting completely motionless, freed from the long days of standing on slippery mud cliffs. There are no river storms to conquer in this quiet room, no loved ones to repair before morning, and no savior guilt strong enough to pull the solid earth out from under your spine. You have returned to the immovable granite quay from which you were made. Grant your mind complete permission to lay down its endless rescue missions. You do not have to solve the puzzle of how to protect another person's future. You do not need to figure out how to stop the river from flowing before the sun rises. Those tasks belong to the wild currents outside, and you are resting far inside the quiet river shelter now, where protective panic holds no meaning and codependent sacrifices are no longer required. If a stray thought of fear for someone else flickers through the dark, let it be like a single patch of river foam floating past on the dark eddy, touching the quiet shore briefly before dissolving into the water. You do not need to catch the foam in your bare hands. You do not need to tie a rope to its bubbles. You can simply watch it drift past and vanish into the quiet shadows, leaving your broad granite foundation perfectly calm, perfectly grounded, and completely untouched. The night has built a quiet shelter around your bed, protecting your weariness from the storms of the world outside. Tomorrow will arrive in its own time, bringing its own river currents and its own simple boundaries. But tonight belongs entirely to stillness. Tonight is a sacred sanctuary where your spirit is permitted to drop its rescue lines, unbind its bruised ribs, and sink into the restorative depths of uncalculated rest. You are safe here in the unadorned dark. Your heart knows how to beat without an anchor rope around your waist. Your lungs know how to draw air without a flood in your throat. Your soul knows how to rest when the mind finally leaves the cord on the piling and allows the river steward to sleep on the dry stone quay. Let yourself sink down through the soft, dark layers of sleep, dropping into the deep, quiet bedrock where no one is drowning, where no rescue is demanded, and where your true spirit rests forever solid, whole, and profoundly at peace. When the cool water sweeps past the motionless granite quay in the dark, what can a dock ever lose by remaining firmly anchored to the shore that holds it? 3 YouTube title options. The silent river shelter continues to cradle your frame in profound stillness, held by the broad earth that asks nothing of your weary spirit tonight. Outside in the dark gorge, the cool water flows past the ancient granite quay with a soft, steady cadence, lapping against the stone without requiring that any mooring line be drawn taut before dawn. The thick iron ring set into the granite post rests in its own cool, unmoving nature, untouched by the wild rapids that swept down the mountain earlier in the day. It does not strain to reach across the water, nor does it weep over the timber that drifted into the dark. It simply exists in its deep, unshakable foundation, solid, grounded, and entirely complete in this present moment. When you allow your heart to step back from the exhausting compulsion to save another soul, you touch an ancient, untroubled sanctuary that has been waiting beneath your protective panic all along. The world around you may constantly insist that love is measured only by how much of your own peace you sacrifice, but here in the quiet darkness of your room, those frantic demands carry no weight. You are not required to repair another person's journey to earn the right to rest tonight. Your fundamental capacity to offer a loving, steady presence tomorrow is already whole, held in the quiet, unforced rhythm of your breath, your beating heart, and the firm earth holding your bed right now. Think of how much vital life force has been burned by treating another person's independent path as a burden you were forced to carry on your own shoulders. Their difficult choices, their unpredictable storms, their personal consequences. These are merely the natural, shifting currents of a river that belongs entirely to their own learning. They do not define your core value as a human being, nor do they possess the power to pull your granite foundation out of the bedrock unless you bind their heavy ropes around your own waist. When you choose to let their river remain their river, the tight, burning knot sitting in your ribs quietly begins to soften, leaving behind a broad, spacious ease that fills your chest with clean air. Let your physical frame yield even more deeply to the steady mattress supporting your body. Feel the deep, heavy warmth spreading down through your upper back, loosening your shoulders and relaxing your hips, thighs, and ankles all the way into your toes. Your hands feel soft and completely unburdened, resting lightly upon the sheets like empty mooring rings resting on cool stone. There are no river storms you must navigate tonight, no rescue plans you need to invent, and no life you need to fix before the sun rises. In the timeless wisdom of Zen reflection, true compassion is found not in drowning alongside a struggling swimmer, but in becoming a firm, unshakable shore where a refuge can truly exist. When you drop the heavy demand to control another person's fate, you return to this simple, sacred landing. You realize that your life was never meant to be a thrashing body, tossed in the rapids, but a broad, solid quay where a warm hearth fire can burn brightly through the night. Picture the mountain gorge stretching out beneath the vast, quiet canopy of the midnight sky. The cool river mist drifts softly through the weeping willows, touching the wet leaves, the dark granite, and the calm water with an unhurried, peaceful rhythm. Inside the timber shelter, the hearth fire glows with soft, warm embers, completely unbothered by the river flowing through the rocks outside. Everything in the gorge sits together in quiet harmony, resting in the dark without needing to alter the current or conquer the night. Allow your awareness to sink completely into that silent, spacious sanctuary. Feel your breathing grow lighter, slower, and completely effortless, flowing in and out like a faint river mist passing through an open timber shutter. Your physical body is heavy, quiet, and fully held by the broad earth beneath your house, dropping deeper and deeper into the quiet, restorative dark. You are given full permission to let go of the entire world now. You are permitted to stop saving others, to stop carrying their storms, and to let your whole being settle into deep, undisturbed rest. The night encloses your room in absolute stillness, shielding your weariness from every crisis and every heavy burden. Outside, the morning will arrive in its own time, bringing its own light and its own simple boundaries. But right now, there is only this soft bed, this cool air, and the deep, abiding peace of a steward who has finally returned home to the dry stone quay. Sinking down now softly and effortlessly through the quiet shadows of sleep, floating down into the deep, dark bedrock where no one is thrashing in the flood, where no rope is bound around your ribs, and where your true spirit rests forever solid, grounded, and profoundly at peace.